Hello everyone, this is Professor Warren, and today we're going to go over how to use sources. So, as we talked about in the last class, we talked about how to find sources, and now it's time to talk about how to use these sources. Your textbook says that the first thing you need to do once you've collected your sources and after you start to read them is practice what's called infotension. And infotension can be as easily understood as being able to just synthesize and think critically about information, particularly enormous amounts of information, because I assume as you've been looking for things, sources to use for your paper, you've probably come across a lot of information that you think can be useful. I know reading your proposals, I saw that many of you said you wanted to use things like interviews, news articles, academic articles, personal statements, etc., right? And there's no way in 5 pages you can use all of those sources. So particularly as a modern researcher, right, and we're always bombarded with information, you need to be able to practice infotension and be able to say which sources or pieces of information are crucial to my argument and what pieces of information may not be as substantial. So again, once you've found your sources, make sure to stick with the ones that you know are vital to your argument, that'll help to support your claims, and sort of weed out the ones that maybe are not as necessary. And this is building a critical mass. Essentially, a critical mass is collecting several pieces of evidence to help shape a claim of your argument. So for you guys, I asked you guys to come up with a working thesis, right? And a working thesis consists of a topic and then a comment on that topic. Now, at this point, you need to start developing a thesis statement, right? Because now you have found sources, you're reading through them, and your sources will help to sort of point you in the direction of your claim, right? Claims, at least for our purposes, will have 3 main claims minimum for your paper, and those 3 main claims support your argument. So for instance, maybe you said something along the lines of, sugar is a social evil. That's your working thesis. Sugar is your topic, and the comment on that is a working thesis, or is your comment on that topic. Now you're building 3 main claims. So say out of all the sources you found, your sources are pointing you to maybe 3 main ideas that support that. So now you would develop a working thesis that says sugar is a social evil because it leads to diabetes, it can increase your fat content, and overall it shortens your lifespan, just as an example, right? Each of those 3 main claims you now gave in support of that working thesis, right, came from the sources that you found. So make sure that when you're building a critical mass, you have good pieces of evidence to really solidify those 3 main claims that you came towards. And this is why you need to sort of stay away from circumstantial evidence. And circumstantial evidence is, again, indirect evidence that suggests a connection but does not prove it directly. Now, this isn't to say that, you can never use circumstantial evidence, but when you have circumstantial evidence, it's often pieced together with much more solid pieces of evidence. So for our purposes, right, it likely will not serve you if you have, say, 1 main claim that's built on circumstantial evidence or evidence that's just not evidence-based at all. It's more personal beliefs, right? So make sure your claims are strong, and those claims will be strong when they're backed up with at least credible or reasonably credible evidence. So now that you understand why you use sources, how they make your claims, let's talk about synthesizing information. Synthesizing information, or in its single form synthesis, is just immersing yourself so much with the information until it seems natural to you. Again, synthesizing information is a good way to gauge whether you've learned that material and you understand those topics. You should be able to read information and then be able to say that information in your own words. And you do so through usually, these main ways: paraphrasing, summarizing, and quoting. We've already went over this, but just to reiterate, paraphrasing and summarizing, while they're very similar, they're ultimately different. Because paraphrasing is when you restate, condense, or clarify another author's argument while also providing credibility to your own argument or analysis. Again, you still in-text cite these because you didn't know that information and you're utilizing that author's argument or their words, right? So paraphrasing is essentially taking specific parts of their argument and putting it in your own words so that it helps to bolster your argument. Summarizing is usually summarizing the entire gist of what it is that they're saying, the entire article or the entire book, what have you, or the entire chapter. And that's boiling things down to their basic ingredients. Again, that would be the author's main argument, their thesis statement, the major claims that they give in support of their argument. Again, not every piece of evidence, but the major pieces of evidence, as well as what they found. And good summaries also tell the reader what you took away from it, right? Did you agree with their argument? Do you disagree? Maybe you agree, but you think that they missed a big, important section that they should have talked about, right? So that's what summarizing are. And again, you still in-text cite these because, again, it is not your own original line of thinking. And then quoting is taking the exact phrasing, right? Word for word. And again, sometimes it is crucial to use quoting because you can't say it any better than how that person said it. But again, these also need in-text citation because, again, that is absolutely not your words. So, going a little bit more in depth, paraphrasing, you want to use paraphrasing to not only test your knowledge on a particular subject or the material, but paraphrasing is also good to show your audience you can understand that material, that you're very well versed in it. And your book tells you the ways that you can effectively paraphrase. The first thing you do is identify the source of your paraphrase and comment on its significance, right? So again, in a paraphrase, say the author had a section in his article where they discuss, I don't know, let's go back to the sugar example, how sugar, leads to a shorter lifespan, right? And he's got this small section on it. You would identify that in the source, you would synthesize it, and then commentate on it, right? Reword it, rephrase it in your own original words. When you're paraphrasing, remember to always respect your source. So again, you're likely taking parts of their argument, not the whole thing. That would be summarizing. But you don't want to, as you're doing that, take an author out of context or misinterpret what they say. So again, when you're paraphrasing, just make sure you're not distorting the author's original idea or, trying to take them out of context to sort of cherry pick them for your claim, right? That's just, disrespectful to the original author. And speaking of disrespect, again, make sure you cite your paraphrases, right? It's not your original ideas. Make sure it is in your own words. Make sure you keep comments and thoughts separate from your paraphrase. Students tend to really sort of struggle on this part. When you're paraphrasing, don't try to put in that paraphrase your original ideas or what you think or any sort of distortion of the author's ideas. You should paraphrase and then the sentence after, commentate on that, right? Or break it down and elaborate in your own words. And that's where voice markers or signal words, which we'll discuss here in a second, help to keep that separation between what they say and what you say. Also, decide where's the best place for the paraphrase in your paper because, again, at the end of the day, this is your paper, your original thoughts. So the paper shouldn't be completely their words. Utilize them sparingly and strategically to enhance your claims. And always double check to make sure you're accurately reflecting what the author is saying. Again, we already just touched on that, but really to reiterate, right? Don't take them out of context. Make sure you're accurately reflecting what it is that they're saying. Because again, you'll be taking what they say and synthesizing it and putting it in your own words. Summary. So again, the reason you likely will have a summary in your paper is to show your audience and help them understand the sources you're using, right? Because you're synthesizing all of that material, right? And you're saying, hey, These sources I use to help to build my argument, and you have to summarize in order for your audience to get what those sources were about. And similar to paraphrasing, again, be respectful of the original author, make sure that you're accurately reflecting what it is that they're saying. Make sure you identify their thesis and their supporting points. Again, you can't capture everything, but keep it clean and concise and get the main gist of what it is that they're talking about. Again, summaries need to be in your own words, but they also need to be in-text cited because, again, while you put them in your own words, it's not your original ideas. And your text did not say this, but I always love to put this in there, is that at the end of a summary, this is where you should be reflecting and responding to what it is that you're summarizing. Do you fully agree? Do you think they do this well? Do you not think they do this well? Do something well? You really need to, at the end of a summary, just don't leave it hanging out in the wind. Put a nice sort of finisher on it. Tell us what you took away. Do you agree or disagree? Why? Or do you think the author maybe missed something? Or do you think that they accurately are reflecting what it is they're talking about? And then quoting. So again, quoting should be used sparingly and strategically, right? Because again, these are someone else's words and you don't want to bog down your paper with, not your original line of thinking, because then what's the point of your paper, right? So again, use them strategically, use them in only spots that would be very powerful, and use them very sparingly. Always be respectful. Again, don't take them out of context, don't cherry pick them to prove a point. Always be respectful because you literally, especially here, are taking their words word for word. The reason that you might quote, again, I said use them strategically and sparingly. The only reasons you would quote is for these few reasons I have listed here. One, the way it's So summaries are useful in that you want to show your audience how the sources that you've used can help them understand what it is that you're saying and where you're coming from. These are some of the reasons why you would use a summary, which would be you're identifying the thesis and their supporting points. So again, you utilize a summary in your paper because the thesis and the supporting points help your audience understand where you're coming from with your claim. Also, when you're using summaries, make sure that you just capture the author's main points and their thesis. Keep it clean, keep it short. It shouldn't be too, overanalyzed where you're getting every single thing that they say, right? Just the main stuff, the nitty-gritty. Make sure, again, your summary is in your own words, right? So you're taking that information, synthesizing it, putting it in your own words. And also make sure to cite that, right? Because it's not your original words, right? Or your original thoughts, right? It's in your original words, but not your original thought. And while I say, always get the main thesis and the main points, one of the things that the textbook leaves out that I would encourage you to do is that with a summary, it shouldn't just be hanging out in the wind, right? Put a nice cap to it. And one way you could sort of close off a summary is elaborating, right? Give some objective thoughts about the piece. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think that they maybe have left something out that they should have mentioned? Or maybe you agree to an extent, right? So at the end of your summary, once you've given main points and the main conclusions and their thesis, make sure that you end it with your own objective thoughts about the piece. Quotes are good when you use them sparingly and strategically, right? Because at the end of the day, the paper is your voice, your words, and so it shouldn't be too cluttered with what someone else says. One of the reasons you should be using quotes is for these following reasons I have here. One of the reasons you might need to use a quote is because the wording that person uses is just wonderful. It expresses that point so well that if you changed it in any way by paraphrasing or summarizing, you would just damage the integrity of the message. Another reason you'd be using a quote is if the author who's saying that quote has high ethos, and those ethos could help to support and give credibility to your argument, right? So the words are attached to someone who would help better your argument with their name also, placed into your text. If an author challenges or seriously disagrees with others in a field, if they're strongly debated, or sorry, if they're strongly heated and debate a particular aspect in that field, it might be good to quote them because they have, usually deep insight into that field. And this isn't in your text, but something that you should be aware of is when you quote, right? Sometimes you need to just truly capture the original author's thoughts and their words, particularly if you're analyzing that particular author. So be aware, right? When you use quotes, make sure not to take the author out of context. Don't cherry pick what it is that they're saying. Make sure to accurately write it out and only use quotes when it would truly benefit that part of your paper or for any of the reasons I've listed above. And all of this is to say, don't patch write. Patch writing is stitching together sources without properly summarizing or paraphrasing. It becomes really obvious to me when I see fact after fact after fact after fact with none of your words to sort of explain or explicate those findings. Patch writing can be understood as these following things. If you replace words with a synonym from an original author, that's patch writing, which is also plagiarizing. If you take someone's words and you omit a few words out of what they say, that's patch writing, that's plagiarism. If you change the order of the words, so say for instance the sentence started with in the future, blah 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 blah, right? If you took in the future from the beginning of the sentence and moved it to the end of the sentence, that's still patch writing, which is plagiarism. And then rearranging sentences, right? Not only will, rearranging sentences probably not make sense if you do it, but in terms of, the context, but also rearranging sentences is patch writing, and patch writing is plagiarism. So don't stitch things together, synthesize the information, put in your own words, in text cite it, and elaborate, explicate. What is it doing to your argument? How is it helping to bolster your claims? So, we've already went over how to use sources, but here's really an example, right, of how to really use sources. So, when you develop three main claims, right, because the three main claims that you make are in support of your thesis. So I originally asked you in the proposal to at least give me a working thesis, which is a topic and a comment on that topic. Now you need to be using your sources because your sources are going to point you in the direction of where your claims are going to come from. So now with your three main claims, you need to understand how to use the sources within them. So for instance, I have this example thesis. Although many individuals view rats as nothing more than nuisance animals, they actually benefit humans regarding medical research and are valuable members of both natural and urban ecosystems. If we were to break this down, right, if it was a working thesis, the topic would be rats, right? And the comment on that would be some people see them as nuisance animals, right? This person adds their own stance as well as three main claims that support the idea that rats are